Taxapalooza continues in Olympia. They are just cramming through any tax they can possibly vote on, just to name a few of taxes that have either been expanded or have been brand new taxes. B&O tax, expansion, property tax through local school levies, which we'll talk more about in a moment. Expanding the tax you got to pay when you die. I don't even tax you when you die. Capital gains tax expansion, wealth tax, although they've abandoned the wider proposal, they're trying to sneak through a small one just to put it before the Washington State Supreme Court, which if the court upholds it, they'll push through a bigger one. Expanding excise taxes, expanding reparations fees, a Zinn tax. Yes, for those of you who like to chaw a little bit. The Tesla tax we discussed yesterday. They've also increased the Discovery Pass fee, increased sales taxes for certain types of companies, and those are just a few. So they are busy, busy, busy. But I think one of the things that continues to confuse me is when is this all going to come together? I mean, Governor Bob Ferguson has been pretty clear since his inaugural address that he's not interested in his first year in office signing a bunch of new taxes. And he's sort of given the old tisk-tisk to Democrats a couple times. And at this point, I don't even know if they're working together. I don't know if Democrats are just hoping they could throw a bunch of shit at the wall and see what sticks and see if Bob Ferguson will sign some of it. But it's really dysfunctional what's happening down there right now. So we asked Senate Minority Leader John Braun to come on the show with us today to walk us through not only kind of this mess at the end of the session, but also, as we discussed on the show yesterday, they abandoned their main property tax proposal, which would have increased property taxes, the levy lid from 1% to 3%, but they are still pushing through other proposals that would or will increase property taxes. So Senator Braun joins us to discuss. This segment is brought to you in partnership with our friends at Future 42. Turn your frustration into action at future42.org. Senator, welcome back to Undivided.
Well, thanks for having me on, Brandi.
Yeah, so this has been Taxapalooza down there. I guess at this stage in the session, I would assume that if Democrats are moving to pass all of these taxes, they believe that Governor Ferguson will support them?
I don't know that that's true. A couple of different things are happening. One, I think they've made the decision on what direction they want to go, and they're just going to push forward and try to put the governor in a box. And two, I don't think they really know what they're going to get done. What we've seen is these new bills they've dropped or majorly revised bills, especially for business and occupation tax and for the sales tax on services. They are changing virtually every day, sometimes a couple times a day, as they go through committees in the Senate, then the Senate floor, then the House committee, and now the House floor, or vice versa. There's more and more changes. So literally, they're taking votes on bills they don't even have a accurate fiscal note for. So they don't know how it's going to affect taxpayers, what it's going to raise for their budget. They're just hoping it all comes together in the end.
Do you think it's more strategy or more panic on their part?
I don't necessarily think it's easier. I can't believe it's a strategy. Well, I mean, they are on a train track, and they are intent, particularly Senator Peterson is intent on finishing on time. I don't think it's necessarily a strategy. They're just trying to solve the problem that's right in front of them right now, and then they'll get the next problem after that. I do think that they, the broader plan, which is they want a lot of new taxes, is working. What they did is they waited until late in session before they introduced their big tax package. I mean, it seems like a long time ago, but it's only a few weeks ago when they introduced their first tax package. For the first 10 weeks of session, they didn't talk about taxes at all. And then they introduced that. They found out the governor didn't like some of it. They didn't have the votes for all of it. And they introduced a whole new one, basically the middle of last week. And now they're trying to rush that through, pretending to offer public comment, but really very little input during very short hearings in both the House and the Senate, and really not listening, because still doing things that never had a hearing on the floor of the House, or I'm sorry, on the floor of the Senate, without much regard for public input.
So, I mean, Governor Ferguson, for all, I think, his flaws, in my opinion, he has slapped their hand a few times over taxes. He did it in his inaugural address, where he basically said, look, we're doing things a little different. And then he did it the first time they came around with an idea, and he just did it again, like you said. So I guess I don't understand why there isn't Are they not talking to each other? Are they not working with each other behind the scenes to make sure that the third time they come up with a plan, he's going to sign it?
Well, I do think they're talking to each other. That's everything I hear, and I'm without really talking about the things I've discussed with the governor. He gives every indication that he's talking to them. They're just not agreeing, and to a certain extent, I think the Senate, to a certain degree, and even more so the House leadership, Democratic leadership, just kind of wants to push through. And frankly, the interesting thing is the House Democratic leadership is probably getting more pushback from her members than the Senate, but she has a very vocal and aggressive progressive group over there that's got, they're pushing it over, trying to push it over the top and drag their colleagues with them wherever they have to.
Yeah, I mean, but I guess I'm still just, I haven't seen a session quite like this. I'm confused because we've got, what, 2 days left? And so is there hope, you think, that they'll just box, like you said, Ferguson in and he'll just sign a budget because time's run out?
Yeah. I don't think he'll do that. I mean, I think he's been courteous, but he's been pretty clear too. And I thought his one statement maybe was a little bit weak, but if you actually get down to what he said, by the time he got done blaming everybody else for a problem, he said this is too much, and he's right. And I think he's still firm on that. We'll see. But yeah, I think they are kind of getting closer, but seeing if they can drag him up. And here's the reality: if he says $12 billion in new taxes is ridiculous, and by the way, that doesn't count the other $5 billion in local taxes, well, then $10 billion is 90% are ridiculous. It's still ridiculous.
Yeah, I agree. So what do you think the chances are of a special session?
Better than 50-50, I would say. I think the way it's going to happen, though, is my guess, because my impression, they haven't shared this with me. My impression is they've locked down their operating budget, which they would have had to do, if not yesterday, today, to get it all, because it takes several days to write the bill to get through the negotiations. They've locked that down, and I think my impression is they're still overspending more than the governor has said he's comfortable with, but they're gonna run it right through and then put it in his lap, and he's gonna be faced with, do I sign this or do I call him back? Much smarter for him, and frankly much better for the state of Washington for him to call him back and have us sit down and do a better job. It would really only take a few days to fix this and get it back, get on a better track for Washington. I don't think the majorities are gonna voluntarily do that until they're faced with a veto. Personally, that's my opinion.
Well, let's hope that he's willing to sort of slow things down if it needs to happen. So let's take 2 quick victory laps, if we can call it that. I think they're victory laps. I mean, some Republican caucuses thought I was wrong on that, but the effort to increase the property tax levy lid from 1% to 3%, they've abandoned. I think that's a big win. Do you not?
I do, and we've worked really hard. This is more than any of the other taxes. This is the one we worked the most on, getting the word out to the people of Washington, and they responded by weighing in with their legislators in their district. So I think that's a big win. But I would tell you, because the work's not done there, because they've come back with some levy policy that in many ways is just as bad, and we could talk about that if you like. But they're setting us up not only for a huge different property tax bill from local levies, and it's going to be big, but more importantly, they're going to set us up for another McCleary lawsuit, and that's going to be the driver for the Democrats to go for even bigger tax increases in other ways. Not to mention the inequity issue, which is going to leave some of the kids in our state behind with insufficient funding for education because the state's not doing their part.
Yeah, and I absolutely want to talk about that in a second. I just think, for people who are kind of on our side of things, and who I know a lot of people for the first time had come down to the protest, or they testified about how the property taxes would impact them. And you guys held a fantastic press conference highlighting some of those voices. And I think they need to know that your voice matters. And I do think it became just too controversial to touch. And so I want to make sure that they feel empowered by continuing to participate in the process. So on the local school levies, explain that to me like I am 2 years old, what they're trying to do.
Okay, it's been a while since I had a 2-year-old child.
Oh, it's okay. You can, even if it sounds condescending, I'm giving you permission.
Go
ahead.
I don't want to be condescending either. So here's the simple deal, and you have to have a little bit of history. This has happened twice in our state's history. First with the Dorn decision, clear back in like 1980, and then with a McCleary decision in 2012, where the state Supreme Court has weighed in and said, hey, our Constitution, our state's Constitution says it's our paramount duty to fund basic education. We are over relying on local levies to fund that education, and we're getting unequal results because of that, because affluent places like Seattle or Mercer Island, Bellevue can raise a lot of money in local levies, and poorer places can't raise much money in local levies because of their assessed value. This is unconstitutional. Legislature, go fix this. And we spent 5 years after McCleary trying to fix it, and it was a hard deal. But to do that, you had to push down on local levies. There's nothing unconstitutional about having a local levy, but inevitably what we see, and what we're seeing again, is when the levies grow, or the state invests less in education, or because the state invests less in education, it feels compelled to allow the levies to grow. And that's what's happened, and this is a big move in that direction. The simple terms is it's going to allow the levies to increase by $500 per child, which is about a 20% increase. And then it's going to allow those levies to grow for the next 5 years by inflation plus 3%. So in basically 5 or 6 years, you're going to have around a 60% increase in what's authorized for local levies.
Wow.
Now, that doesn't mean they become local levies. Doesn't mean it's a tax right away. The voters still have to pass that. Okay. But what historically happened is one of two things. One, they in the more urban areas, because the high assessed value, the rate increase, to raise another $1,000 per child, rate increase is pennies. It's a dime or a quarter per $1,000 of assessed value. In more rural areas, like where I represent, it can be $2.50 per thousand. It can be as high as $5.50 per thousand if you can pass it. And that's the thing that I think is going to bring the real inequity, is because of the overall pressure on property tax, and that's why we had such a public outcry about the rate increase. It's getting harder and harder to pass levies. We have three in my, just we're up for a vote yesterday in my district. All three look to be failing at the moment. We'll see what happens. I understand the levy in Tacoma is failing right now. This is a combination of voter just weariness in property taxes, and frankly, to a certain extent, and this gets into a whole other topic, failure of trust in our K-12 public education system.
Thank you. That's the first time that's been explained to me in a way that I can understand it. And so basically, voters still have to approve it. But not only is it more likely they'll approve it in blue areas and more affluent areas like Seattle, they can also approve and convince voters to approve a much smaller jump to fund what a rural area would have to be, like this huge jump in property taxes, and they're more likely to vote it down in a conservative area as well. So that makes a lot of sense. And they'd use that to what? Fund basic K-12 or kind of add-ons?
Yeah, what happens is it gets mixed in, and whether it's funding basic education directly or it's supplanting money that should have been funded by basic education, pretty soon, and just in dollar terms, you have thousands of dollars more per child available in rich districts versus poor districts.
Yeah.
And that's not hard to understand how, even with cost of living differences, eventually that ends up with more programs for some kids and less programs for other kids.
Yeah, and we'll be right back, as you said, to where we started with McCleary and lawsuits and all that stuff. Really quickly, one other kind of win, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, is the payroll tax done? Expanding Seattle's Jumpstart tax statewide.
That is the one. I'm hearing nothing about that. They're still trotting out a small wealth tax, maybe for a court challenge, but the payroll tax seems to be all done. So I think, if you want to count victories, I think both the first property tax fight, we're in the second one now, but the first one, absolutely, I think you're 100% right. People should feel like their voices were heard. What they don't yet know is that they've switched directions and they have to keep fighting for it. Yep. And on the payroll tax, I think we've won on that issue. Yeah,
but the B&O tax obviously is bad. And it was fascinating. I mean, on a couple fronts, we played clips on the show yesterday. Both of them were from Joe Fitzgibbon over on the House side, on the Democratic side. Basically, we appreciate businesses. However, we need their money to do this. He said the same thing kind of with Tesla when they passed this tax, which is kind of on just Tesla. He literally said some of their profits are better served, in our hands for a public good, which was just crazy to me. What do you think the impact of the increase in B&O tax is going to be on our business environment?
I think it's going to be huge. I think it's going to be devastating, frankly. I think, and it's really odd, and it's also regressive. You might mention to Joe every time you see him, is they insist on improving our tax system, and yet at the end of the day, they're pushing the property tax regressive, sales tax regressive, B&O regressive. This is what they're pushing, and it's broadly on the B&O, broadly on businesses. We just saw our revenue for receipts for this month come in $70 million below what was projected, and the projections were relatively low. Now, I admit that's just one data point, and hopefully it doesn't continue. But this has me very worried that we're headed in a bad direction, and taxing the crap out of businesses is not going to help that.
And did you
Not
say
at all.
70 million, right? Not billion.
70 million below the projection.
Wow.
So for 1 month, and that's just 1 month.
Wow.
So we'll see what happens next month. 1 month, we were 70 million below what the state's economists thought we would get. And the state's economist is being pretty conservative right now. He really doesn't want to miss a recession, and we're not meeting that goal. So it could bounce right back, in which case that's great for Washington. I'd certainly be pleased to see that, but I worry about that data point.
Yeah, well, I think what's so stunning to me about this session compared to others is in the last session we saw a little bit of this dysfunction, but you have a party that has overwhelming majorities in the House and the Senate. They have the governor's office, yet they are so dysfunctional. I mean, if they could kind of get together behind the scenes, they could push all this through like smooth sailing, but there's so much disagreement. I think the progressive wing is very aggressive, but I mean, does that stand out to you? That doesn't seem like par for the course.
Yeah, I think what you're seeing is you have more and more progressives in each of the Democratic caucuses. I'm not sure. It's hard to say whether, certainly in the very aggressive vocal ones, it's not a majority of their caucus, but they're running the show. And you have some more moderate or moderate-ish Democrats who are uncomfortable with the direction, but they don't have the fortitude, or they haven't been able to get enough numbers to stand in their way. And they're going to have to buck up if they want something reasonably moderate for our state. That's just a fact. So they're going to have to stand up. And so far, they've been, I think, a little bit cowed, frankly, by their caucus mates.
Hey, I agree. I saw somebody who I have a tremendous amount of respect for yesterday, Representative Maury Leavitt, who's a pretty moderate Democrat, who was the deciding vote on the B&O tax, and I was just shocked by that. But I don't know how much of that is pressure or what it is, but just a really bad vote. So, Senator, we appreciate it. Good luck down there. I have a feeling it's going to be a long 48 hours for you, so good luck.
All right. Well, thank you. I appreciate you having me on, and we'll keep fighting.
Yeah, and what he was too nice to do is, again, correct me. It's not 48 hours, it's 4 days. So Sunday is the last day, and whether we figure out that they're going to go into a special session, because, which is ridiculous. This is a long session. Olympia has short sessions and long sessions. This is a long session, and they still don't have enough time. January, February, March, April, 4 months isn't enough time to do like the most important thing that you're supposed to do. So I really do kind of agree with maybe his thoughts that it's intentional to leave it all to the end. So it's happening so frantically that no one can keep up. No one except us, obviously. No one knows what's going on. No one's reporting on all of it because too much is happening too fast. And then the governor's just like, okay, sign it, and then move on. And then, session's over. So we're going back to our lives. So part of me believes that. And then part of me also thinks, so what they're doing right now with giving more local tax, school tax levy control to local school districts is that they are intentionally trying to put us back in a situation where the state is going to be sued for having this inequitable outcome in education, where poor school districts get poorer, richer school districts get richer, so that they can justify next session, the session after that, we're getting sued again because we're not funding education the way we need to. So now we need to push through all of these new taxes that maybe we couldn't quite get across the finish line this time. So I think they're throwing our education system intentionally into a chaotic situation with funding so they can come back and justify new taxes. That segment was brought to you in partnership with our friends over at Future 42. Turn your frustration into action at future42.org. They're always looking for opportunities to make Washington a place where all of us can prosper. Yes, all of us. This is undivided after all. All of us should be able to prosper in this state we love.